Thomas Brandenburg, who is an adjunct professor at the Illinois Institute of Technology.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, so I'm an adjunct professor at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and I've been teaching a workshop there in the iPro program, interprofessional program there for a couple of years with my colleague, Twisha Shaw Brandenburg. And one of our museum clients, we have worked with clients that are museums in Chicagoland area, and we worked with the Kohl's Children's Museum for one semester back in 2017. So a little bit more about the Kohl's Children's Museum. It's in the northern suburbs of Illinois, and they concentrate mainly on toddlers to 6-year-olds, designing experiences and educational experiences for them. We had two key stakeholders in this project. One of them was Stephanie Bynum, who is the Vice President of Programs at KCM, and also David Judy, who's the Senior Director of PR and Marketing. And they were our key point people throughout the semester that provide feedback on the concepts and the prototypes. They provide for us initially a challenge statement, and this is it. How might we increase the awareness and visitorship to the Kohl's Children's Museum in Glenview, Illinois? So, immediately beginning the projects, we have the students do research, primary and secondary research, and, immediately they noticed and shared is that, since it's outside of Chicago, it's pretty far outside of Chicago. It's like 25 miles outside the center of the city and 15 miles outside the city. There isn't a lot of public transportation that gets you there, so that makes an obstacle. Also, through the research, the students found that, that parents have a lot of options in terms of education and entertainment. So we sometimes call that edutainment. So museums are not necessarily top of mind for parents to take their children to. So through the research and through synthesis of the research, that we encourage the students to reframe the problem and still meet the needs of the client. So now the reframe of the problem is, how might we increase awareness and visitorship to Kohl's Children's Museum by bringing the museum closer to the family? So bringing the museum to the neighborhoods, bringing it to towns and the surrounding areas. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the approach that we have. So we start out with having to do primary research, going to the museum itself, going to competitive museums, also interviewing parents, and also leveraging secondary research. And then through that, they synthesize it and come up with visitor and user insights and frame the problem or reframe the problem. We have them do 3 initial concepts and pitch it to the client. And out of that, the client gets to pick one of them and move forward with it. And then they do prototyping. And as you can see in this background photo here, there's a testing of a prototype that they develop of building blocks of building monuments around the world. And through the prototyping, they found out that, color was essential, and actually having bright colors was actually overly stimulating. So they took the color out and then actually muted the color in the blocks. They also watched how the parents interacted with the children and through the facilitation of the exercises. So there's a lot of iteration that goes on before they finally pitch it at the end of the semester to the to KCM. And so through this, through the prototype and the concept of the service of a pop-up museum, they were really excited at the the opportunity. So out of that, they initially went into planning and fundraising, and so 2018 they did about 9 months of that, and then they did 2 months of building, and then they piloted the first pop-up. So the first pop-up you can see on this map on the top right is Waukegan, and that was the first location. It's about 25 miles north of Kohl Children's Museum. It's near the Wisconsin border. And that one was in a space that was a storefront in downtown Waukegan, and it was approximately 5,000 square feet. It was a great location because it was across the street from the main library, and it was down the street from a care center. The other 2 locations they did was Round Lake Beach and North Chicago. Those were smaller venues. They had 2,500 square feet for each of those. And the other thing I want to mention about this is that these are all locations that the per capita income of those areas are substantially lower than where Glenview is. Glenview actually is in the top 2% of the state. So this allows people that didn't have access to museums to STEM or STEAM education experiences to get access. This is a few photos of the interior of the first Waukegan site. In the storefront, they had 7 stations there. They were manned. This pop-up was manned by 4 people. They had everything from science discovery, art experience, physical and digital interaction, gross motor play, and puppet theater. I'll walk through some of the deliverables that we had for them. There was the museum site visit analysis. We also did a competitive audit, stakeholder mapping, as you can see on the right-hand side here. They also did Valley Web mapping. Basically, it's an ecosystem, understanding what are the resources being traded between entities and individuals, and then also a business model canvas. Deliverables also include the service blueprint and concepts and renderings and prototype. So thinking about the impact that this pop-up had was that it created a high awareness. For one, is that when they started posting this on social media, they immediately had, for example, on Facebook, they had over 400 shares and 100 likes. Now, their typical posts before that, we analyzed that, throughout the year before that, they would only have 10 likes and 10 shares on average per post. So there was a lot of engagement area in that. And then also, they had excellent engagement with the schools, because in the surrounding area, let's say, for example, Waukegan, 8 schools brought 45 field trips to that pop-up during the month of February. And during that time, that had very limited hours. They only had 20 hours a week. Each week it was open, but they had a high volume of visitors, also families. So they had 2,500 visitors come during that time. And they also conducted surveys with teachers and the parents, and they had a really high satisfaction rating that was over 90%. And then, as reflections for myself and my colleague, I think it was really important that we had buy-in from the stakeholders of the museums, particularly with Stephanie and Dave. Help them giving feedback and then also being part of the process. It really, I think, helped them also feel like they were much involved in this in order to take it on themselves. So the other thing was, I think with the students, they're not familiar with the museum. So, doing stakeholder mapping and doing the value web mapping helped them to get a understanding of the current condition, and also thinking about what is the future models that they could be working with in terms of partnerships, and then also, thinking outside of what it means to have the pop-up experience outside of Chicagoland. And then lastly, I think if I had my way with this particular project, normally we have one semester engagement with the clients, but I think with this one, the students and us would benefit more, and also the client would, if we had 2 semesters to work with them versus 1. In terms of KCM reflections, when I talked to Stephanie Bynum, she mentioned that she reached out directly to the principals of schools in the surrounding areas where they're going to have the pop-ups. She felt like by doing that, other than just emailing people or passively sending out information, that was a key element for them in order for them to get buy-in to have them send field trips over to the pop-up. And then also, there was a barrier of scheduling school buses to get there. You had to find out you had to do it a month or 2 in advance, and in some cases with these schools. So some schools got around it by actually taking public buses to get there with their field trips, but other ones, it was a little more problematic. The third thing was, as I spoke before, that, the families acknowledged now that it was really high impact on underprivileged minority families that didn't have access to this museum. And it was a free museum experience because they got enough fundraising to make it possible. Now, talking to David Hankey, who is the exhibit director at the museum, now they're having to deal with the pandemic. And so there's a lot of learnings they had to do along the way for that. For example, that they had to now institute super cleaning crews on sites so that, they, after a small group would be in an area, they have them there and they time limit them to like a half an hour, and then they go in there and they do a cleaning before they allow another group to go in that same area. So they swap out spaces. They also have sanitizer stations there, and they also are not allowed to have digital interactives at this point. And then also thinking how to be even more flexible. They're thinking about having pop-ups, not just indoor, but having outdoor ones. And then thirdly, he was thinking that having a bank of theme activities so that, every time the exhibit goes from location to location or returns the following year, that they, keep the experience fresh. So that's the end of the case study. There's a lot more details that you can see that are published within the library, more reflections and details of that. So I encourage you to look at that and other ones. But I also want to give special thanks to Stephanie Bynum, David Judy, and David Henke, and Twisha Shaw Brandenburg, and the students that were on the team that worked on this project.